Sometimes I get code applications from people who want to work for us. These are usually the most eager ones, so that's great. In this instance, we didn't have a job for that person. So that person emailed us and this is what they wrote. Can you advise me how much the role of a Ruby on Rails developer is in demand in the market in our region? And how interested is your company in cooperating with novice developers? Perhaps not through full employment, but through outsourcing or as an internship. My plan was to master the basics of the framework, write a couple of pet projects and participate in open source projects, find acquaintances who would find my web applications useful, try myself in freelancing, find a company with which I could build cooperation dealing with real business projects, and then become a full-time programmer, making it the main source of income. Okay, so first, this was a really good cold email because he got one thing right. There's this principle about when you want to have money, or when you get money, ask for advice. You want to have advice, ask for money. This is basically what he did. The same holds for jobs. I quickly want to talk about demand. Yes, I had a quick look about it. So let's check here. So Ruby is right now used by around 5.9% of the websites, which is actually more than I thought. And 5.3%, so almost everything of that is Rails. Rails is the framework which runs on Ruby, and it's just a very, very known framework, and a lot of companies got built by it, Airbnb and Stripe, and back then Twitter and Shopify and so on. So yeah, if you want to have a career in Ruby, you are very likely to be coding in Rails in the framework. So you cannot really get around it. So this plan in general, this is a solid plan. It looks like he already had some ideas what he wants to do, and he's still asking for the demand in the market. I got an opinion about the demand. So the thing is this: yes, you can get a job fast if you're going for a mainstream framework. Let's say you're doing something with PHP. Back when I started coding, PHP was my framework of choice, or my language of choice, because it was easy for me to just boot up a web server and code something and then upload it to another web server, which back then you can get these very cheap web services where you can just upload the files and you would be able to roll your own application, send it out to friends in a matter of minutes or hours. And nowadays that's a bit more complicated because we have like huge stacks we need to deploy. I think PHP is still simple, but Ruby was always a bit harder. So if you're just going for the mainstreamliness of a framework, yeah, you can just do PHP. It's 76% of the websites run on PHP. I think it's mostly attributed to WordPress, because WordPress alone powers something like 25%. But you can also go for JavaScript, and then you basically have the language that runs on almost all the websites. Okay, but there is one thing I wanted to talk about. It's not just the demand, because you also need an undersupply of labor. So let's say if you want to go for a language, let's say JavaScript in this case, you are only basing this on the demand. You also need to see how many people are there applying for jobs. Let's say in JavaScript, everybody knows JavaScript. And let's say every web dev knows JavaScript at least a bit. And a lot of newbies are starting with JavaScript. A lot of coding boot camps start with JavaScripts. So the problem with JavaScript, at least when you want to hire someone, is not to find enough candidates. It is about finding good candidates. So basically, in order to be a successful JavaScript developer, you need to have good contacts right away, or you need to go through and swim with a lot of applicants. This makes it harder to get started. Even though the actual coding is easier, finding a job might be harder. I might be wrong on this. If you think I'm wrong, please leave a comment below. I'm happy to discuss this with you. So if it's about getting a job, then it might even make sense to go for a more niche framework. And this could be Ruby, of course, but Rails, but it could also be something like Phoenix, Elixir, could also be Rust. Because there usually, if it's more niche, there is usually an undersupply of labor. You can also go for something ancient like COBOL, or BASIC, or Turbo Pascal, or Delphi, or any of these older languages, because usually the languages that are around for a long time are also the languages where all the developers are very old, and older developers tend to have families, so their salary goes up. With JavaScript people, you find someone in India and in Africa very cheaply. So like a young kid who's maybe 20, 24, and they just have coded a couple of years already. They're starting with that. So you're competing with those guys. That's what I mean. Undersupply is also criteria. But in general, oh, there's a typo. Let me correct this. What should you focus on? What you should focus on? I think much more important than to choose a framework or choose a language based on what you think was the demand is more, where are your friends? Where are people you can connect with? Are you able to make friends on the internet? Then it doesn't really make a difference. You can find communities everywhere. But maybe local communities, maybe you have some friends, maybe you meet people at tech meetups or at coding meetups. So I think that person comes from, he didn't say it here, I think it's from Estonia. So they would just go for, let's say they live in Tallinn in Estonia, look for tech meetups, look for any kind of niche framework or niche programming language meetups. Look what JavaScript is in the world of JavaScript, what's happening in the world of PHP. Just look at what's going on there and then we connect with some people, because in the end it's about accessibility. If there are people who are doing the stuff and people you can relate to, people you can connect with, that is accessibility, and that makes it easier to stick to something and easier to be excited about something. For me, when I started with PHP, my main problem was that I didn't really have friends who coded PHP. And back then, yeah, I had the internet, but I wasn't really aware of many coding communities. And back then there was much less, of course. So back then when I did it, I had to teach a lot of stuff to myself. And then I went into my first internship, and there were some people who coded PHP. So then I could learn much more. Okay, that's one thing, accessibility. The next thing I wanted to point to is friction. Friction means, where do you have the least resistance to work in? So let's say you're just not a person who want to deal with a lot of like system stuff. So maybe you don't want to have a language that's compiled. Maybe you just want to have the simplest thing, go for a browser-based language like JavaScript and just start to code. Go where you have the least problem getting started and the least problem sticking to something. So for example, if you would, let's say you would start with Rust. Yeah, Rust is great. I coded, I think, a summer in it, and it's a great language. It's very hard to learn though. And it's also very hard to produce results, because in order to show something with Rust, you need to learn a couple of steps first. If you go for, let's say, PHP, you can install WordPress and then you can start modifying it, or just take a web server and upload it. If you already have a basis, let's say you know some basics, you have coded, like me, I started with PHP, I knew the web basics, and then I did Java, and then I did Ruby. For me, it was a progression that was every step along the way was kind of easy to do, and that was important for me. So maybe don't start with the hardest thing, but for sure, let's say if you're coming from the data science world, if you know some math and some physics, maybe Python is a good way to get started. Maybe you are excited about something where you think you can make some project very simply with the stuff that you already know, and then you use programming in order to make it happen. So that's friction. And I would say, once you decided, go for side projects. That's what I just said. Make something that gets you excited and then code it out. Because usually I have seen people learning stuff in some kind of academic way, and usually it's harder to do. The most success I've seen people in coding was when they got excited about something and then had some vision of what they wanted to build and then made that happen. So quick story from me, because it's just very close to me when I got back into programming. So I had a phase where I didn't program between 2012 and 2018. In the beginning of 2018, I restarted my programming career, and I knew some Ruby, but I basically forgot everything. But I knew that there was a language I really liked. And it was less friction because I knew I could start with that easier than with other languages. And it did everything I wanted to do. So I built an English learning chatbot, and I just coded for half a year on that chatbot. And that allowed me to go into the freelance career right after around half a year. Because in that case, I didn't have much friction. I knew roughly what I could do. I was enthusiastic about the project. I really wanted to make this English learning chatbot, and I actually thought in my head that I'm going to make a lot of money with that. In the end, I just made $200 or so. But along the way, I just learned everything I needed to learn for production environments, or for like production grade programming. So I learned testing, I learned deployment, I learned a front end, I learned Vue.js in order to make it nice. I learned processes in the background, I learned database, everything along the way just to make this chatbot happen. And this is why I would encourage you as well. I mean, you in a sense of the person who emailed me here. Try to make something where you can stick to something and go from A to Z, go from idea to full deployment, and make something that you're proud of. As a business owner, as an agency owner, I get a lot of applications, and yeah, sometimes the code applications are great, but sometimes they're just really people who think they can make a test project, like making a chat, something like this new Hotwire stuff with Ruby that everybody likes. You have like 2 windows and then you chat with each other. That's like a tutorial thing. I'm not impressed by tutorials. And someone coding a chat and then just sending it out to someone who might hire them this is such a short-term thinking that this even turns you off. This is even worse than no side project shown. Because if you're doing something that you don't care about, like the people will notice that you show this to. But let's say if you say, okay, I would still do a chat, but you make it really, really nice. So for example, you put emojis in there, you put a lot of testing, you make a deployment, you can have a sign up where people can check this out. You can, all these surroundings, like it doesn't need to be big, but it needs to be complete. Because in this world right now, we are overflown with people who are not finishing stuff. The attention span gets slower and slower, smaller and smaller. We're all like scrolling to the next thing and then switching. And so people who are finishing are very incredibly rare. So even if it's like a small project, bring it to completion, and this will impress people way more than anything else. And then, so I had an idea of completing something. So for example, how about this? Let's say you give yourself, let's say you know a bit of programming and you want to get an internship. Can you get it a quarter? Can you get 3 months of solid focus and take 100 hours each? So 100 hours would get you around 2 weeks of work if you're going at it. And that's easily possible. 50 hours a week is easily possible if you really want to make this happen, right? So you do this every 2 weeks, it's like 50 hours. So per month you have 50 hours per week. So after 100 hours, you have 2 weeks. So you have 6 attempts of something. So you can learn 6 languages in a very basic way. And then you already know what language you like. How about that? How about you are investing first before making a decision based on other people's thinking? I think this is my punchline here. I don't know how much time the person actually put into that, how many emails this person sent. Maybe they just wanted to really get us an internship, but I would argue before you do that, just put in these 100 hours. And how about after 100 hours, you write a blog post. You have 6 blog posts. You just say 100 hours of Python, 100 hours of JavaScript, 100 hours of Ruby. 6 blog posts. And you would then email companies and say, hey, listen, I want an internship and your company does Python. And I tried these 6 languages and Python, I like this thing about it. Do you think there's any kind of chance we can talk? Maybe there's something we can do together. I think that's my advice. Just invest more, prepare more, and then the answers will come very fast. You will see what is something you really want to do. Because being enthusiastic about something beats everything else. It beats smarts, it beats skills, it beats relationships. You can bulldozer over other people if you're just enthusiastic about something. Okay, let me know what you think, especially the person who emailing me. I would love to hear back from you what you did. I'm very curious to see what went with your career. Have a good one.